Caveman Love. That's the title of this video. And here's our caveman. A Neanderthal man. A man from tens of thousands of years ago. My name is Leonard Kozianski. I'm an artist and this is my studio. Welcome to my studio. And today we're going to be talking about caveman love, caveman sex, because cavemen loved cave women and they had cave babies and made cave families for cave tribes and eventually nations. But to do that, they had to have lots of sex. They had to create lots of people because they had to have the human race survive through wars and famines and floods and all kinds of disasters. And the only way they could do that is if the caveman had desire for the cave woman. But he didn't just want any kind of woman. He wanted this kind of woman and not this kind of woman, just like men today. And we have the proof of that going back tens of thousands of years. In fact, this carving is from 25,000 years ago. It's carved out of ivory. It's maybe about 2 inches high. It's one of the probably the earliest image or representation of a human head in the entire history of human civilization. And here, this very early statuette, this is about 4 inches high. This is the Venus of Willendorf. It was found in Austria about 25,000 years ago, and it's carved out of limestone and probably carved with a piece of sharp flint. And in it we see, what was meant to stimulate a man, what's meant to get him turned on, because, they needed to have lots of sex, to have lots of babies. So what's going to get a man turned on? Well, for the caveman, it was large breasts and a large belly. Is that a pregnant woman? Is that a symbol of fertility? And large thighs, and we can see her vagina. And she's wearing that elaborately carved little cap. Now, that for 25,000 years ago, carving that kind of detail out of limestone with a piece of sharp flint was a major technical achievement. And here's that statue seen from 4 sides. Again, about 4 inches high, limestone. And we can see that the caveman wanted a large-breasted woman with a large rear end. Was this meant to encourage sex and fertility? Here's another one, the Kostanki Venus. This is found in Russia. Again, about 25,000 years ago, carved out of ivory, a large-breasted woman with a large rear end. Is this what was meant to stimulate a man, to make him desire a woman? And here's another one from about the same time, about 25,000 years ago. And look at those huge breasts. Oh my God, and those huge hips. And it seems very distorted to us. Not very desirable at all, but this is meant to get a caveman turned on. And we have to remember, back then, people were a lot dirtier and they were a lot smellier. And there were no grocery stores, so the women were all probably very thin. So this was like his male fantasy of a desire of what was desirable in a woman, represented in sort of symbolic form, because this is what Neanderthal women looked like. And here's another image. Cavemen love these images of naked women. Men today love images of naked women, sexy naked women. And, and here we are, here's this, the Hohlfels Venus, which again, it's about 2.5 inches high, carved out of mammoth ivory, because there are still woolly mammoths running around. So this was carved from one of a woolly mammoth tusk. Here's another view of it. And we can see that at the top, instead of a head, there's this little loop that they could, put a string through or a leather lanyard through, because they would wear it around their neck. So not only were they not ashamed of images of naked women or their desire for images of naked women, but they actually wore them around their neck as talismans. And even today, in our modern era, we have magazines with pictures of large-breasted naked women. Very please, very pretty, very pleasant, very agreeable naked women with these looks in their faces like, come and get me, big boy. And, and here we have this magazine devoted to pictures of women like that, meant to stimulate men, get men turned on. So should we be ashamed of that? Feel guilty about it? And even today, in the internet era, we have these sites, these websites with these pictures and videos of naked women, being very sexual. And, these websites are very popular. And it's not like this is some weird little offshoot of the web. These websites are the most popular. In fact, whenever they do a survey of the top, dozen or so internet sites, these 4 major porn sites are always at the top of the list. It is the most well-represented segment of the internet industry. And, men now and have been, had this great desire to look at images, pictures of naked women going back 40,000 years. And here, we have these moralists on the internet, these podcasters and these sermonizers who tell us that, well, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should feel guilty for having this desire to look at images of naked women. Oh, really? Well, we've had that desire for 40,000 years. Seems pretty normal and natural to me. Now, yes, we can't be addicted to that if we find ourselves doing it every day. Well, that's not good. We have to become disciplined. We have to channel that energy in productive manners. Okay? But that takes time. That's part of the maturing process. And we don't do it automatically. It takes time. We have to learn discipline. But we must first respect ourselves for these instincts, for these desires. We cannot discipline our desires if we don't have respect for them first. And so let's not let ourselves become prisoners or victims of these moralizers who would denigrate us and ridicule us for our very normal, natural male desires. And, talk about respectable. Okay, what could be more respectable than one of the largest art museums in the world, the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, which houses some of the greatest Renaissance masterpieces. And if you've never been there, you owe it to yourself to go there. Don't go in July, though, because you have to wait in line for 5 hours. Go in March. But when we walk in the Uffizi Gallery, what do we find? The Medici Venus, one of the sexiest, most erotic works of art of all time. Well, this was patterned after the Venus or the Aphrodite of Cnidus. Now, Aphrodite was the Greek goddess of love and sex. And her statue, a life-size statue, which unfortunately was destroyed. We don't have it anymore, but there are many copies made of it. This was kept in the temple to Aphrodite, and men were encouraged to come into the temple and pray to the goddess Aphrodite and staring at her statue to get erections, to get hard-ons, to get turned on by this image of this sexy young woman. And so here we have this, the Medici Venus from the 2nd century BC in Greece. And it was such a turn on that when it was in the Uffizi Gallery in the Renaissance, when the Medicis owned it, and when they had it in their gallery, and young men were coming through the gallery, they had to look at the floor. They were not allowed to look at the statue because it was felt to be so sexy that it would encourage lewd behavior. And here's a painting of the Uffizi, the interior of the Uffizi from the 18th century. This is 1772. And, we can see the place is just packed with paintings of, the life of Christ and Renaissance portraits. But what are all the men looking at? Well, there over on the right, we have the Medici Venus. And there over on the left, we have the Venus of Urbino by Titian. And that's what everybody's clustered around. Look at those young men all gazing at the rear end of the Medici Venus. And, it's, and there are people that would tell you, that if you have a desire to look at images of naked women, then that makes you low life, that you're sleazy. Well, let's look at those pictures. Look at those people in this painting. Okay, a couple of those men are wearing ceremonial swords, which means that they are nobility. They're like, counts or earls. They're the cream of the crop in European society. And what are they doing? Why, well, they're appreciating great art, admiring these fine masterpieces for their craftsmanship and fine painting technique. No, they're all looking at the naked girls. That's what they love looking at and have for centuries, for tens of thousands of years. And here we see a great example of that. Oh, and here, talk about a temple of propriety. A temple to culture and great antiquity. Here we have the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. And we walk into the museum, up the grand staircase there, through the great doors, and what do we find in this temple of culture? More naked women, more naked girls, more pretty naked girls, sexy girls. And this is from the 2nd century AD. Okay, this is a Roman copy of a Greek statue. This is from the Roman Empire. And the Roman artists received commissions from Roman men, Roman aristocrats, to make copies of these famous Greek statues of Aphrodite, the goddess of love and sex. And so here is this Roman copy of a Greek statue, and it was, meant to be sexy, meant to be erotic. And here it is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, a piece of great art that we are to appreciate for its fine craftsmanship. Oh, and here, talk about pornographic. Here, this painting by Ang from 1811. This is Jupiter and Thetis. Now, Thetis was a water nymph, and she was the mother of Achilles. And Achilles is off fighting in the Trojan War. And so she goes to Jupiter, she goes to Zeus, and begs him to please protect her son. And so here she is using all of her feminine wiles to beg Zeus to please protect her son. She's very pretty, very pleasant, very seductive. And she's painted in a very seductive manner. Tweaking his beard that way. And, if we look at her, though, when we were looking at those previous statuettes, those fertility statuettes, and they look kind of distorted, and we thought, oh, God, that's kind of weird. But I look at this body of this naked woman, okay, or almost naked woman. Look at her pelvic area. That's about twice as large as it would be on a normal woman. And look at her neck. I mean, she's got like about 3 extra vertebrae. That's about a 10-inch, 12-inch neck there. And look at that left arm of hers, that back arm that's tweaking his beard. Well, it's about 6 inches longer than it should be. But you put it all together to create this very sensuous curve going from her foot all the way to her fingers. And it's an image of sexy eroticism, if there ever was one. But because, was this proper? This painting was exhibited in Paris, in the Paris Salon, and in the greatest art show in the world at that time, and by Victorian gentlemen and gentlewomen. And was this appropriate? Well, of course it was, because this is a scene from Homer's Iliad, a scene from classical antiquity. So when we are gazing at this picture, we're not looking at the naked woman. We are appreciating scenes from classical antiquity. Well, even Saint Paul, here's this portrait of Saint Paul by Rembrandt. Saint Paul says to us, to the Roman men, because the Roman men they felt that sex was very healthy and very good, and they should do a lot of it. And so, they were sort of notorious for being unfaithful because they're out having sex all the time and, banging the slave girls. And so St. Paul, in one of his letters, says to the men, he says, husbands, love your wives, and wives, be submissive to your husbands. Why? Well, what he's really saying is, husbands, stop banging the slave girls. Love your wives instead. And to the wives, he's saying, well, if you want him to stop banging the slave girls, well, then be submissive. Be pretty and pleasant and submissive and agreeable. Well, here's this painting by Rembrandt, a portrait of St. Paul. The head and shoulders are obviously Rembrandt, but the hands, they don't look like Rembrandt. They're probably painted by an assistant. Oh, and here, finally, here this is a painting of Roger and Angelica. Roger, this is a scene from, again, ancient literature. Roger rescuing this damsel in distress. And of course, isn't she hot? Isn't she an amazing woman? Well, she's a little distorted too. Look at her neck. I mean, again, she's got about 3 extra inches on that neck. But here he is rescuing her from this dragon, slaying the dragon. And what it does is illustrates that, in addition to men loving, having this instinct, this desire, this innate desire to look at images of naked women going back 40,000 years, in addition to that, we also have other very powerful instincts. And one of those instincts is the instinct to provide and protect. In fact, men will protect their women to the death. They will die protecting their women. And so, we have to respect ourselves. We have to respect our instincts and our desires. And we have to expect others to respect us as well. So, yes, we must respect women. But we must also make sure that they respect us and that they respect our instincts and our powerful desires. And, yes, it takes discipline, and that discipline takes time. But, we have those desires because that is what has allowed us to create this human race, to have the human race survive through floods and wars and fires and famines. Okay, and we have this great desire to provide and protect, along with this desire to look at images of naked women. And we can see that goes back 40,000 years. In fact, we've been looking at examples from 30 and 40,000 years ago, so we know it goes back a long way. But we must have respect for women. And if we ever find ourselves being disrespected by a woman, then what we need to do is we need to say bye-bye and turn around and walk away and never look back. If you find yourself being shamed and denigrated by a woman and find yourself getting angry, remember, we never ever strike a woman in anger, ever. We turn and walk away and we don't look back. Okay? We have to respect ourselves. We have to have self-respect. And we have to respect others, but we have to have respect for ourselves, our own desires and our own instincts that go back tens of thousands of years.